Yeah, it was a very strong turnout. I think there was a signal from the electorate that was sent with around 74% going out to vote, which smashed previous records, which were 62% back in 1989 at the year of Poland's democratic transition. So it really was a kind of plebiscite about this government. And there was a clear message that was sent that this government will not have a third term, though it should be noted that it does remain the largest party. It will be the largest party in the next parliament, but without a majority and without any clear or plausible path to create a majority at this point in time. So we would expect a coalition of three opposition groupings to form the next government, but that may take some weeks for the process to unfold.
Yes, and heading that will be a former Prime Minister returning to potential power. But as you point out, it's quite disparate. He's trying to bring together a coalition from both the left and the right.
Yes, that's correct. And that means that we would expect it to be a difficult government to manage. There are three different groupings. One of them is quite centrist, one of them is centre-right, and the other one is left. They have very different views on a wide variety of issues, from abortion to social redistribution, and it will be difficult for them to negotiate an agreement on what their policy agenda should be, on questions of personnel, which parties will get different ministries, and so on. And on top of that, they will face a president who is still in power until the next presidential elections in 2025, who is affiliated with PiS and has the right to veto legislation. And this coalition will not have its large enough majority to overturn that veto. So it will be a difficult government, and it could be a tumultuous time ahead of Poland.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, Poland had become very conservative. Abortion rights were just one issue where they were cracking down extremely hardly. Do you think that's going to change some of those very conservative approaches?
It seems that it may. So that restriction of what were already very restrictive rights to abortion in Poland was delivered through a captured court. The constitutional court that PiS essentially filled with its own appointees. But the three opposition parties have quite different positions, although there's some kind of perhaps path to agreement between them. So two of the parties are supporting somehow introducing some kind of legislation, and how that would sit with the court's ruling is difficult to say at this time, but some kind of legislation that would allow abortion on demand essentially until the 12th week of a pregnancy. But then the third, more conservative of those groupings, is less declarative about what they think. They're saying that there should be a national referendum on the issue. So there are already signs today of some disagreement between those parties on what the position should be. But I would note that the abortion issue may well have been important in motivating a good number of voters, especially younger voters who came out in unprecedented numbers, and women voters to vote against the current government. So that particular decision and the way that process unfolded, you may remember the massive protests that were on the streets of cities across Poland in 2020 when that ruling was made, that whole period and the social unrest that resulted from it may have contributed, at least in some part, to the defeat of the current government in these elections. Although defeat is, again, perhaps not quite the right word when they remain the largest party.
No, you're right. They still got a lot of support. What was interesting was Poland was extremely supportive of Ukraine. Thousands and thousands of refugees from Ukraine flooded into Poland. In recent times, things have got a little testier between Poland and Ukraine. Was this election also significant in terms of ongoing support for Ukraine?
It became a marginal issue in the election because one of the minor parties, a far-right party, was quite strong in a kind of anti-Ukrainian position, which captures a marginal level of dissatisfaction with the cost of support for Ukraine in Poland. But the majority of Polish society and the majority of the political class is fully supportive of everything that Poland has done to stand behind Ukraine, militarily, in terms of humanitarian aid. But because of the threat to the ruling party of that small far-right party, they then moved to a more Ukraino-skeptic, let's call it, position in its rhetoric. And that then created a kind of, a bit of a crisis in Polish-Ukrainian relations in compared to what we'd seen before. But underneath that, there were not really concrete decisions made that significantly changed the nature of that relationship and the nature of the support that Poland is giving. It is across political boundaries for the most part. So that support did continue and will continue. But what the new government, the opportunity that the new government will provide is for a kind of symbolic reset, because it was really in the symbolic and rhetorical realm that this deterioration of relations happened, and the new government will have an opportunity to reset that.
Stanley, really appreciate you joining us with those developments. As you say, still to be worked out, time will tell.
Thanks for having me.